I stared at my reflection in the elevator of my parents' luxury apartment building, straightening the simple black dress I'd chosen for Thanksgiving dinner. 5 years ago, they'd laughed when I left my prestigious law firm to start my own business. Now they had no idea that I owned the very building they lived in. "Going up to the penthouse, Ms. Morgan?" the doorman asked politely, not betraying any hint that he knew I was his actual employer. "It's James. Family dinner." I smiled, remembering signing his last performance bonus myself. "I'm Sophia Morgan, though my family still calls me Sophie, like I'm perpetually the little girl who could never measure up to her brilliant siblings. Tonight would be different, though they didn't know it yet." The elevator opened directly into my parents' penthouse, where the familiar chaos of a Morgan family gathering was in full swing. My mother stood in her designer kitchen directing the catering staff she'd hired. My father held court in the living room, bragging about my brother Marcus's latest corporate acquisition. $30 million deal, he boasted to my uncle. "That's my boy, a real businessman." Marcus caught my eye as I entered, his smirk as practiced as his Windsor knot. "Well, look who finally showed up. Still playing with your little startup, Sophie?" If he only knew that his $30 million deal had been quietly financed through one of my subsidiary companies. But that wasn't the biggest secret I was keeping. "Hello, Marcus." I kissed his cheek, catching a whiff of expensive cologne. "Congratulations on the Peterson merger." He waved dismissively. "Please, like you understand corporate acquisitions. How's the," he made air quotes, "entrepreneurship going?" "Still working out of that shabby office downtown." That shabby office was actually just a front. My real headquarters occupied the top 3 floors of the city's most prestigious business tower. Morgan Ventures, known to the world as MV Global, had become one of the largest private equity firms in the country. We specialized in acquiring distressed properties and troubled companies, turning them around through careful restructuring. My sister Victoria swooped in, champagne glass in hand. "Sophie, darling, I almost didn't recognize you without those awful business casual outfits you used to wear." Victoria, the golden child. Harvard Law, federal judge by 35, and according to our mother, everything a Morgan woman should be. She had no idea that her precious brownstones mortgage had been quietly purchased by one of my shell corporations last month. "You look well, Vic. How's the new house?" She beamed. "Perfect. In the best neighborhood, obviously. Though the mortgage is killing us with these interest rates. Not that you'd understand renting that tiny apartment." I hid my smile behind my wine glass. I didn't rent anything. I owned half the luxury properties in the city, including the building where my tiny apartment was actually the entire top floor. "Sophie." My mother's voice carried from the kitchen. "Come help me with the plates. Since you don't have a real job, you might as well make yourself useful." 5 years of comments like these. 5 years of dismissal, condescension, and thinly veiled disappointment. But I had built something they couldn't imagine, all while they thought I was failing. "Coming, Mom." I set down my wine and headed to the kitchen, where my mother was arranging designer plates with military precision. "I do wish you'd reconsider coming back to Patterson and Mills," she said, not looking up. "Your father still has connections there. They might take you back even after you embarrassed us by leaving." Patterson and Mills, the prestigious law firm where I'd worked 80-hour weeks making other people rich. They'd offered me partnership track, a corner office, and golden handcuffs disguised as stock options. Instead, I'd walked away to start my own company. "I'm happy with my choices, Mom." She sighed dramatically. "Happy? You're 32, unmarried, and playing entrepreneur while your siblings are actually successful. The Crawford's daughter just made partner at Goldman Sachs. Meanwhile you're," she gestured vaguely, "doing whatever it is you do." What I did was run a billion-dollar private equity firm that had just acquired Goldman Sachs' newest real estate division, but she didn't need to know that. Yet. My father's booming voice interrupted from the dining room. "Everyone sit. Marcus has an announcement." We gathered around the massive dining table, a recent purchase that had cost my parents a small fortune. I noticed the distinctive maker's mark and had to suppress a laugh. The furniture company was another one of my recent acquisitions. Marcus stood, commanding attention like he'd learned in business school. "As you know, Peterson Technologies agreed to our buyout terms last week. But what you don't know is that this deal has put me in line for CEO. Applause erupted around the table. My mother wiped away tears of joy. My father looked ready to burst with pride. To Marcus Morgan, my uncle raised his glass, the next CEO of Morgan Industries. I didn't have the heart to tell them that Morgan Industries itself was now effectively owned by my company, through a complex web of debt acquisitions and stock purchases. Marcus wasn't going to be CEO of anything once I was done. And in celebration, Marcus continued, I've bought a new house. Closing next week, 10,000 square feet in the Heights. More applause. More congratulations. Victoria chimed in, the Heights? That's where my new house is. We'll be neighbors. Actually, my mother added, practically glowing, your father and I are closing on a summer house there next month too. The Morgan family compound. I pushed my food around my plate knowing what they didn't. The Heights was a luxury development that my company had acquired last year. Every mortgage, every property, every deed was ultimately controlled by me. What about you, Sophie? Marcus turned his attention to me, that familiar condescending smile in place. Still in that rental? You know, if you need help with a down payment, I could spot you something. What does a failed entrepreneur make these days? The table laughed. Even the catering staff looked uncomfortable. I do all right, I said quietly. All right. Victoria snorted. Is that what we're calling it now? Last time I drove past your office, it looked like it hadn't been renovated since the 90s. Someone has to stay humble, my father chuckled. Not everyone can be as successful as Marcus and Victoria. I thought about the documents sitting on my desk at my real office. The ones that would reveal exactly who owned what in this family. The ones that would show them that while they were laughing at my failed business, I had been quietly building an empire. Still playing entrepreneur? Marcus raised his glass in a mock toast. When are you going to get a real job, Sophie? The room got quiet, waiting for my response. 5 years of these comments, these jokes, this constant belittlement. But tonight would be the last time. I picked up my phone, which had just buzzed with a text from my CFO. Everything's ready. All mortgages have been transferred to MV Holdings. Do you want us to send the notices tonight? I looked around the table at my family. My brother, the supposed business genius. My sister, the legal prodigy. My parents with their new money arrogance. None of them had any idea that their perfect lives had been quietly purchased by the daughter they mocked. Actually, I said, standing slowly, I have an announcement too. But before I could continue, my father's phone rang. Then my mother's. Then Marcus's and Victoria's. All their phones ringing simultaneously with calls from their banks. I sat back and sipped my wine, watching as their faces changed from confusion to disbelief to dawning horror. The night was about to get very interesting. The chaos erupted all at once. Victoria nearly dropped her phone, her perfectly manicured hand shaking. Marcus's face had turned an interesting shade of gray. My mother sat frozen, phone pressed to her ear, while my father frantically paced the dining room. This must be a mistake, Marcus was saying into his phone. What do you mean the mortgage has been transferred? To whom? Victoria had tears streaming down her face, ruining her expensive makeup. But we just bought that house. How can the mortgage belong to someone else? My parents were having their own crisis. The summer house closing. What do you mean it's been denied? We have perfect credit. I sat quietly watching it all unfold. The catering staff had wisely retreated to the kitchen, leaving the family drama to play out in private. MV Global? My father suddenly bellowed, making everyone jump. Who the hell is MV Global and why do they own our mortgages? That was my cue. Actually, I set down my wine glass with a soft click that somehow cut through the chaos. I can explain that. All eyes turned to me. The phones were still buzzing, but nobody was answering them anymore. Sophie, Marcus said slowly, his business instincts finally kicking in. What do you know about this? I smiled, remembering all the times he'd lectured me about business. MV Global is my company. Well, one of them. The parent company is Morgan Ventures. Though I doubt you've heard of it since I operate primarily through subsidiaries. The silence was absolute. Even the phone seemed to stop ringing. That's impossible, Victoria whispered. You run that little consulting firm downtown. That little consulting firm is a front, I explained calmly. My real office is in the Morgan Tower downtown. You know, the building Marcus tried to buy last year but couldn't because an anonymous buyer Outbid him? That was me. Marcus collapsed back into his chair. You're lying. There's no way. I pulled out my phone, opened my banking app and slid it across the table. The number displayed made Victoria gasp. That's just one account, I said. Would you like to see the company valuations? The property portfolios? The acquisition records? But how? My mother stammered. 5 years ago when I left Patterson and Mills, you all thought I was making a mistake. What you didn't know was that I'd already secured backing from major investors. While you were mocking my little startup, I was building one of the largest private equity firms in the country. My father had stopped pacing. The penthouse. I own the building, I confirmed. Have for about a year now. James the doorman? He works for me. So does the maintenance staff, the management company, all of it. Victoria's legal mind was finally catching up. The Heights development. Also mine. Every house, every mortgage, every property in the development belongs to MV Global. Including your new brownstone, Vic. And the house you're about to close on, Marcus. And that summer house you wanted Mom and Dad. Why? Marcus demanded, his face flushed with anger now. Why do this? Because you never saw me, I said simply. Any of you. You were so convinced of my failure that you never bothered to look closer. Did you really think I could afford those business casual outfits Victoria mocked on a failing entrepreneur's salary? Or that I kept that shabby downtown office because I couldn't afford better? I stood up, smoothing my simple black dress, which cost more than Victoria's entire designer wardrobe. I kept up appearances because it was easier than dealing with your interference. And while you were all laughing at my supposed failure, I was quietly buying every piece of real estate you depended on. You can't do this, my father growled. We're family. Family. I laughed softly. Was it family when you told the Crawfords I was an embarrassment? When you excluded me from family photos because I wasn't successful enough? When you spent every holiday belittling my choices? My mother reached for my hand. I pulled away. The mortgages will be adjusted to market rate, I continued professionally. The sweetheart deals you all enjoyed are ending. You can stay as tenants if you wish, but things will be different now. You'd make us pay rent? Victoria looked horrified. In our own homes? They're not your homes, I corrected. They're my properties. You're welcome to look for housing elsewhere, but... I smiled. I should mention that MV Global owns about 60% of the luxury real estate in this city. Marcus stood up suddenly. This is ridiculous. I'm calling my lawyer. Carlton and Bryce? I asked innocently. I acquired their firm last month. But feel free to call. I'm sure they'll be happy to explain that everything I've done is completely legal. The realization was finally setting in. Their perfect worlds, their sense of superiority, their financial security, it all depended on the sister they'd dismissed as a failure. What do you want? My father asked quietly. Money? Power? Name it. I looked at him for a long moment, remembering all the times he'd told me I wasn't good enough. I want you to understand something. While you were bragging about Marcus's millions, I was making billions. While you were proud of Victoria's judgeship, I was building an empire. I didn't do this for money or power. I did it to show you that the daughter you underestimated had become more successful than all of you combined. I picked up my purse, genuine alligator, worth more than the dining table we sat at. The new lease agreements will be delivered tomorrow. Standard market rates, no family discounts. If you choose to stay, you'll find I'm a fair landlord. If not, I shrugged. I hear there's affordable housing available in the suburbs. Sophie, please. My mother was crying now. We can work this out. We could have worked it out years ago, I said. You could have supported me, believed in me, treated me like family instead of a disappointment. But you made your choices. Now you can live with them. I walked to the elevator, then turned back one last time. Oh, and Marcus? About that CEO position at Morgan Industries? I wouldn't get too excited. The board meets next week to discuss restructuring. Since MV Global owns a controlling interest in the company, I have a feeling things might not go your way. The elevator doors closed on their shocked faces. As I descended, I thought about the empire I'd built while they weren't watching. The power I'd accumulated while they were busy mocking my failed business. They would spend tonight panicking, calling lawyers, trying to find a way out. But there was no escape. Every property, every mortgage, every piece of their privileged lives was now controlled by the daughter they'd underestimated. In the lobby, James held the door for me. "Good evening, Ms. Morgan. Will your family be staying long?" I smiled, thinking of the market-rate lease agreements sitting on my desk, ready to be delivered. "They'll be staying exactly as long as they can afford to, James. And please, make sure their rent is collected on the first of each month. No exceptions." My driver held the car door open as I slid into the back seat. Through the tinted windows I could see the lights of the city, my city now in many ways. Buildings I owned, companies I controlled, an empire built on the foundation of their contempt. Let them spend tonight realizing that their perfect lives had been quietly purchased by the failed entrepreneur they'd mocked. Let them wake up tomorrow understanding that they were now tenants in their own homes, paying rent to the sister they'd dismissed. Sometimes success isn't about proving people wrong. Sometimes it's about letting them discover just how wrong they were, all on their own. My phone buzzed, probably Marcus or Victoria trying to negotiate. I declined the call without looking. They'd have plenty of time to reflect on their treatment of me while they wrote their rent checks each month. After all, I wasn't playing entrepreneur anymore. I was their landlord, their creditor, and the owner of everything they'd taken for granted. And unlike them, I wasn't interested in family discounts. The next morning, my assistant delivered a stack of papers to my real office, the one in Morgan Tower with the view of the city. They were photos from last night's security cameras. Marcus throwing things in the study, Victoria crying on the designer couch, my parents sitting shell-shocked at the dining table long after I'd left. I put the photos away in a drawer. I had a board meeting to prepare for, properties to manage, and an empire to run. My family had spent years telling me to get a real job. Now they could spend years paying rent to the company I'd built while they weren't watching. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just success. It's making them pay for underestimating you, one mortgage payment at a time.